Okay, we're going to take a look back at the Cain and Abel story, because people keep asking me about Cain. He's the first non-paternal twin, him and Abel. Cain was Satan's kid, and Abel was Adam's kid. You can see this in the lineage for yourself, that Cain is not mentioned as Adam's offspring. It's not that he was omitted because of the sin he committed. All right? Now, if you look at the story, Cain, although he was Satan's son, had a heart to serve God. He tried to serve God with all of his heart. In some instances, Cain was smarter than Abel, all right, in the sense of working with vegetables. All right, like Cain sometimes would keep a good vegetable, the best of his shit for himself, rather than just, sacrifice it. But that was working with vegetables. It's not the same as working with meat, where Abel always gave his best looking sheep as sacrifice. Abel's sacrifice was a blood sacrifice. Cain's sacrifice was not, because Cain was not, he didn't work with animals, he worked with the land. He worked the land. God goaded Cain, okay, to get the response out of Cain that he wanted. God would not leave it alone until Cain finally became enraged enough, heartbroken enough, and enraged enough to kill his brother, who he loved, right? Now, we have what's coming. We have an entity that's going to be portraying an entity against God, an entity that God has prophesied about. Now, can we trust God? You see, after goading a response out of Cain that he wanted, will he just make a decision about, an entity and goad a response out of them until they become what he wants them to be? You see, how do we know that he didn't do this with Lucifer himself? Didn't just goad a response out of him until he got that response. You see, you have to look at the examples of the things that happen. How God openly, he is openly corrupt to accomplish his goals. To give you another example, Abraham and Sarah traveled through the equivalent of gangland territory for years, with Abraham lying and presenting Sarah as his sister, right? God blessed Sarah with a barren womb because of the way the land was back then. God wanted to create a nation that wasn't like those other lands, where people could pass through without their wives being raped and them being killed so their wives could be raped and tortured to death. So, Abraham was smart enough to lie and say, yeah, that's my sister. Then they just take their turns on her and send him on his way. But if Abraham had told the truth and said, yeah, that beautiful bitch is my wife, then they would have killed him and gang raped her and killed her. You see, because they didn't take the wives of other men long term. They took them as sex slaves. Now, Abraham was in the habit of living like this when he finally came across a land that wasn't evil, and he was still lying. And the king saw Sarah and decided to take her as his wife. And then the king kicked Abraham and Sarah out of his land when he figured out that she was his wife. Called Abraham a liar and a deceiver and evil above all other men he had ever met. He probably was, because the king's heart was broken, or he fell in love with another man's wife. The man was presenting him as his sister. But the king didn't know what Abraham and Sarah had to live through, that, hey, they had to lie, or Abraham would have already been dead and Sarah would have already been raped to death. You see, these are things that are not included. You're supposed to understand what the history of the area was when things happened in the Bible. If you don't understand those things, the culture of the lands, then you don't understand why God would have somebody take a certain direction. This video is supposed to be talking about why would you trust God after goading Cain, and I got off into protective, little protective bubble stories. Abraham was the first bubble storyteller. Bubble stories. You protected bubbles with you put around you with lies because they want you to be open and tell them the truth about everything so that they can attack you with the things that they know about you. So that they've got you programmed to tell them. You got to tell them everything on your social media site. You got to take pictures of yourself all the time, and those pictures tell them where you're at, latitude and longitude, which also tell the predators where you're at, latitude and longitude. So then it's just a matter of them lining up the latitude and longitude with location, go to that location and stalk you, and eventually they have you. And if you're not a certain color, the news ain't even going to make a big issue out of you coming up missing. Girls are coming up missing left and right in the United States, and nobody says shit. These kids are posting their locations online. They're under 12, 13 years old. They shouldn't have an iGadget anyway. They shouldn't have a phone with a data package. They should have a phone that calls mommy and 911 and an uncle or a grandma or something, and that's it. And the phone should not receive any calls from anyone but family. And that's it. You see? It's child neglect. You wouldn't send your kid to a dope house or to a sex house and let them run around in it, would you? So why you let them on the internet? The internet is a big old pedophile playground. The internet is a terrorist recruitment center. The internet has nothing good to offer your kid. Those of us who offer your kids something good don't even get looked at. They make sure that our videos don't get seen. Yeah, and ain't nobody who wants the truth anyway. This is the generation of tell us lies, prophesy lies unto us. Everybody wants to feel good and cushy. They don't want you to warn them of the direction they're headed and how they could save themselves and graduate from this mechanism. People don't really want to know that. I'm finding that out. They want to know lies. They don't want to know the truth. But, I do have this small group that they didn't fall away with the rest of them. And these are some interesting stories, some interesting questions, and the stories they explain, the answers. And Cain, I look at this story over and over again in my head, how God goaded Cain. He wouldn't let Cain love him. He wouldn't let Cain be one of his. It wasn't Cain's fault. Cain didn't ask to be born as Satan's kid any more than a puppy dog asked to be born and then, or a kitty cat asked to be born and then neglected and thrown in an animal shelter and then denied life there and then euthanized. Nobody ever loving it. Because this generation got dumbed down and programmed like zombie slave clones to willful disregard to everything but themselves and their popularity. It's like sick little fucking monsters these humans are. That's why. Well, why bother telling them anything? That's why I really don't. I don't do the teaching thing anymore. My private blog has very few members now. I kicked a bunch of people off. A whole group wasn't really there as one of us. They were there as infiltrators. It took me a while to figure that out. Like people who friend you on Facebook, but they really just want to know what's going on. They don't really want to befriend you. They just want to know your business, you see. Some of them want to know it for nefarious reasons. So I'm having a little bit of a problem wrapping my mind around trust for an entity who will reject real love, just because it didn't come from an entity that he chose. And I have a problem with people just childishly trusting an entity like that without weighing him out, feeling him out, trying to figure out what it is he wants from them, stuff like that. It's like I have a real problem with just blindly following along and letting everybody else dictate to you what God's mentality is, That right there is a conundrum for me, that, Cain loved God. God couldn't love Cain. God was a little bitch. about receiving love from Satan's offspring. Even though God knew it was going to happen, allowed it to happen, all but manipulated it, put Eve out there running around in the garden naked, innocent as a rock compared to the other women that had been on the planet for 1,000 years before the eighth day creation was created, at the portal at the Garden of Eden. The portal and the Garden of Eden are gone now. But there used to be a portal. God came right here, passed back and forth through. But Adam and Eve became untrustworthy to maintain the garden at the portal after the sexual advent of the sexual awakening of Eve by a interspecies entity, an angelic being. So, we have from that beginning an understanding of the end, when the first Christ gets here, we know that anti really means imposter or fake or phony or instead of or wannabe, and that he's coming here pretending to be Jesus with the fallen angels that would go back before the flood of Noah for a growing season. And then Christ comes at a time when we look not for him because everybody thinks he's already here, you see. So if you understand how it began, then you understand how it's about to end, right? So there's a thing, there's somebody wrote me, how could I trust God after he goaded a response out of Cain? He goaded murder out of Cain. He goaded Cain to murder somebody that he supposedly selected over Cain. It's like, how diabolical is that? Well, if you think that's diabolical, you're in a spirit scan right now. You're equipped with non-tamperable, non-deletable spirit memory that even records your thoughts. You're being gauged, your spirit is being gauged for real earth existence viability. And if you victimize or, through willful disregard and omission, you victimize, you don't rescue those that you came to this planet, that they're your charges. They could be puppy dogs in a shelter, could be, a issue of your influence or something like that, right? Now, if you fail to graduate from this simulation mechanism, as a temporal entity, well, then you get time looped as your victims. If you had ill-gotten gain, money you wouldn't work for, you get time looped for that, as slaves to pay that back, pay the mechanism back. And then you get eternally executed. The wages of sin is what? Death, not fucking eternity in hell. Okay, the wages of sin is eternal spiritual death. So then you die. You don't graduate to the real world, and the restore point of this mechanism doesn't include you in it. Ergo, you do not exist to commit the sins for which you were time looped, punished, and eternally executed. Punished. You see? God will get, out of these entities that will not give him what he wants, which is, rise up, be equal to those who will graduate and graduate with them. He can't get what he wants out of them. He's going to get what he wants out of them and make them unable to perpetuate their offenses for which he punished them. Now that's real diabolical, okay? If you want to talk diabolical, that's way more diabolical than goading a response out of Cain in my eyes, because they don't realize that, the animals that they're supposed to be treating right are also equipped with non-tamperable, non-deletable spirit memory that will reflect that they never stopped playing with their iPhone. They never stopped playing with their iGadget or their video game or watching reality shows or being controlled by the mainstream in sports long enough to do what they promised they'd do and rescue that animal from the animal shelter. You see, they never do it. And it's in that animals, maybe many animals. How long do these people live? And animals are only going to live how many years? Maybe they were supposed to rescue a few of them and set the example so that other people would follow and do the same things. You see? Because people follow other people. They learn from example. So the parents drop the ball. They don't do the right thing by animals. So then the kids don't know to do the right thing by animals. You see? So it's an offense for the parents to spawn them kids. Right? So then the parents got to be time looped as their kids' victims. And then the parents get to not exist to spawn them kids. It's a beautiful thing, this mechanism we're in. So you have to kind of consider that when you consider the response God goaded out of Cain. I'm still trying to figure it out myself, why he would do something like that. Why he would allow his character to have that flaw in it for us to look at. And it's right from the beginning of the book, okay? So it's like we have that right there at the beginning. To throw a monkey wrench in everything. All of us that have trust issues from having sluts, have a problem after seeing that. I know I do.